The Formula, The Universal Laws of Success by Albert-Laszlo Barabasi. Picture the blood-soaked skies of World War I. Two pilots are carving their names into history, but only one of them you've actually heard of. The first is Manfred von Richthofen, the German nobleman who painted his plane a brazen, taunting red and became known worldwide as the Red Baron. Fearless, a hunter in the clouds, he officially gunned down 80 Allied planes by the end of his career, more than any other pilot in the war. His name is everywhere: books, movies, even frozen pizza boxes at your local supermarket. He's the undisputed symbol of aerial combat success. The other pilot? His name was René Fonck. A Frenchman fighting for the Allies, Fonck was, by every technical measure, the Red Baron's superior. He was a master sharpshooter who rarely needed more than a few bullets to down an enemy plane. While the Red Baron was shot down 3 times, the last one fatally, René Fonck was never so much as scratched by enemy fire. His official kill count was 75, though he claimed over 120. By all accounts, Fonck's performance was equal to, and likely better than, the Red Baron's. And yet, history has almost completely forgotten him. Why? Why does one man, with incredible performance, become an icon, while another man, with arguably better performance, fades into obscurity? This question is the beating heart of a revolutionary book by network scientist Albert-Laszlo Barabasi, called The Formula. For years we've been sold a simple equation: talent plus hard work equals reward. We believe the best performer always wins. The best student gets into the best college. The best employee gets the promotion. But if that's true, why do we see René Fonck everywhere? The brilliant musician who never gets a break, the incredible restaurant that closes down, the deserving colleague who gets passed over. Barabasi, who grew up tinkering with machines in his grandfather's shop in Transylvania, decided to treat success itself like a machine. He and his team gathered mountains of data on artists, scientists, athletes, and entrepreneurs, then took the concept of success apart piece by piece to see how it really works. What they discovered is a secret that will change how you see your own ambition, your career, and your future. They found that success isn't what we think it is. It follows a hidden set of rules, a formula governed by 5 universal laws. And by the end of our journey today, you'll not only understand these laws, you'll know how to use them. This isn't just about understanding why some people succeed. It's about giving you the blueprint to build your own. So let's start with that foundational mystery: the Red Baron versus René Fonck. Barabasi's research offers a simple, yet world-changing, first principle. He says, your success isn't about you and your performance. It's about us, and how we perceive your performance. Let that sink in for a moment. Performance is what you do. It's the number of planes you shoot down, the score on your exam, the quality of the code you write. You have a lot of control over that. Success, on the other hand, is the reward you get from your community. It's the fame, the recognition, the promotions, the sales. That's decided by others. It's a collective phenomenon. If a tree falls in the forest and no one is around to hear it, does it make a sound? According to the science of success, the answer is a resounding no. Your brilliant work, your masterpiece, your game-changing idea doesn't truly exist until a community sees it, acknowledges it, and rewards it. This single idea explains the fate of René Fonck. He was an incredible pilot, but he was just that, a pilot. The Red Baron, on the other hand, became something more. He painted his plane red, becoming a symbol. The German propaganda machine desperately needed a hero to boost morale during a brutal war, and he fit the bill perfectly. His face appeared on trading cards. Newspapers built a mythology around him. The community, the network, found him useful, and they chose to amplify his success. The Red Baron's story wasn't just about his performance. It was about what he meant to us. This brings us to the very first universal law of success. It's a law of 2 parts, and it governs nearly every field of human endeavor. The first law states, performance drives success, but when performance can't be measured, networks drive success. Let's break that down. In some fields, performance is crystal clear. Think about tennis. A researcher in Barabasi's lab, a brilliant woman named Burcu Yususoy, analyzed the careers of professional tennis players. In tennis, every win, every loss, every point is meticulously tracked. Your performance is a number, a ranking that everyone can see. Burcu wanted to see how this performance translated into success, which she measured as the player's popularity. How many people were looking up their Wikipedia page? What she found was a near-perfect lockstep. When a player's performance went up, their success went up. When they got injured and their performance dropped, their success dropped. In a world where performance is perfectly measurable, like on a tennis court, the old wisdom holds true. If you want to succeed, you just have to be the best. But how many areas of life are truly like that? Most of life isn't tennis. Most of the time, performance is fuzzy, subjective, and incredibly hard to measure. And that's where the second half of the first law kicks in. When performance can't be measured, networks drive success. And there is no better example of this than the world of art. Imagine two young graffiti artists in New York City in the late 1970s. They work together under a single name, Samo. Their work is indistinguishable. They are, for all intents and purposes, artistic twins. Then they have a falling out and go their separate ways. One of them, Albert-Laszlo, continues to make art in relative obscurity. You've probably never heard of him. The other? His name was Jean-Michel Basquiat. Just a few years after their split, a painting of his sold for over $110 million. What was the difference? It wasn't their initial artistic performance. That was identical. The difference was that Diaz was a loner, while Basquiat was a master networker. As a teenager, he charmed his way into Andy Warhol's circle. He befriended influential artists like Keith Haring. He sought out the curators and gallery owners who could put his work in front of the right people. Basquiat understood, instinctively, that in the art world, what matters isn't just what you create, it's who sees you create it. The value of a piece of art isn't inherent. There's no objective meter that can tell you a Basquiat is worth millions while another painting is worthless. In 1917, the artist Marcel Duchamp submitted a urinal to an art exhibition, signed it Armut, and called it Fountain. At the time, the society rejected it as a vulgar joke. Today, a replica of that same urinal is valued at over $2 million. Why? Because the network of curators, collectors, and critics decided it was important. The context, the story, the network. That's what created the value. Barabasi's team mapped this network. They analyzed the careers of 500,000 artists, tracking which galleries and museums they showed in. And they found something stunning. The art world isn't one big community. It's a series of islands. Most artists show their work in small, local galleries, and they remain trapped on those islands for their entire careers. But there is a mainland, a central hub of elite institutions like New York's Museum of Modern Art, the Guggenheim, and the Gagosian Gallery. If you can get your work shown in one of these hubs, you're set. The network then carries you to all the other major institutions. Your success becomes a foregone conclusion. The problem is, there are very, very few bridges from the islands to the mainland. So if you're an artist, a writer, a designer, or anyone in a creative field where quality is subjective, the first law tells you that your most important tool isn't your paintbrush or your laptop. It's your network. Your success depends on your ability to connect with the hubs that can amplify your work. This leads to a really practical and perhaps surprising insight about education. We all believe that going to an elite college like Harvard or Stanford is the key to future success. Parents mortgage their homes for it. Students grind for years to get in, and the data seems to support it. Graduates from Ivy League schools earn significantly more than graduates from other schools. But a couple of economists asked a brilliant question. What happens to the students who get accepted into an Ivy League school but choose to go to a less prestigious one instead? Logically, their future earnings should be lower, right? Wrong. They earn just as much as the Ivy League graduates. And it gets even crazier. They then looked at students who applied to an Ivy League school, got rejected, and went to a state school. The single biggest predictor of their future income wasn't the school they attended. It was the best school they applied to. Think about what this means. It's not the school that makes you successful. You were already on a path to success. The ambition and performance it took to even apply to that top school is what truly matters. Boston Latin, an elite public high school, doesn't make its students great. It selects great students to begin with. The school gets its reputation from you, not the other way around. So the first law gives us our starting point. If you can measure performance, excel at it. If you can't, master your network. But what about that huge space in between? What happens when performance is almost measurable, but the differences between the top contenders are so small they're basically invisible to the naked eye? This brings us to the second law of success, a law that explains why experts are often wrong, why superstars exist, and why the last person to interview for a job almost always has an advantage. The second law is, performance is bounded, but success is unbounded. Let's start with that first part. Performance is bounded. What does that mean? It means there's a limit to how good anyone can be. Take the fastest man on earth, Usain Bolt. He's a legend. But he's only about 1% faster than his closest competitors. He's not twice as fast, or 10 times as fast. Human performance in almost every domain follows a bell curve. Most people are average, and even the absolute best are not that far from the rest of the pack. There's an upper limit, a boundary. This is why judging competitions is so incredibly difficult. A retired oceanographer turned winemaker named Bob Hodgson was puzzled by the inconsistent results his wines got in competitions. One year, his Zinfandel would win a gold medal. The next, it would be dismissed entirely. So he designed a simple experiment. At a major wine competition, he secretly served the judges the same wine 3 different times, poured from different bottles. The results were a disaster for the world of wine expertise. One judge gave a wine an 80, the lowest possible score. A few moments later, tasting the exact same wine again, he gave it a 90. The third time, he awarded it a 96, a gold medal score. This happened over and over. The judges had no idea they were tasting the same wine. Why? Because all the wines at that level are excellent. The performance is so tightly bounded that even experts can't reliably tell the difference. Their decisions are basically random. This isn't just about wine. It happens everywhere. In a study of classical music competitions, researchers found that both experts and novices were better at picking the winner when they watched a silent video of the performance than when they just listened to the audio. What they were judging wasn't the music. It was the passion, the showmanship, the visual cues. The musical performance itself was too bounded for them to distinguish a clear winner. This is also why the order in which you perform matters so much. In figure skating competitions, scores systematically increase as the night goes on. The last skater has a huge advantage. Why? It's called immediacy bias. Judges are reluctant to give a perfect score to the first performer because someone better might come along later. As the competition progresses, they become more familiar with the routine and more comfortable giving higher scores. It's not fair, but it's how our brains work. When Barabasi interviewed for his first faculty job, he was the least experienced candidate, but he got the job. His secret? He was the last one to interview. So performance is bounded? We get it. But the second half of the law is where things get really interesting. But success is unbounded. This is the part that explains the existence of superstars. Tiger Woods. In his prime, his golfing performance was only fractionally better than his top competitors. Bounded. But his success, his earnings, his endorsement deals, his fame, it was thousands of times greater. Unbounded. In 2009, he became the first athlete to earn over $1 billion. This happens because success doesn't follow a bell curve. It follows something called a power law. This is the law of the rich get richer. A few people at the very top get a massively disproportionate share of the rewards. Think about the New York Times bestseller list. The book at number 2 might sell 120,000 copies in a week, a phenomenal success. But the book at number 1, just one spot higher, might sell 1.2 million copies. 10 times as many. Is the number 1 book 10 times better? Of course not. Its performance is bounded, but its success is not. This brings up a fascinating psychological phenomenon, the Tiger Woods effect. An economist named Jennifer Brown studied PGA tournament data and found that when Tiger Woods was competing, all of his top rivals played measurably worse. Their scores were, on average, almost a full stroke higher. He didn't just beat them. His mere presence intimidated them into making mistakes. The halo of his superstardom created a psychological barrier. But here's the hopeful part. The effect disappears if you're not in direct competition. When a university hires a superstar scientist, the productivity of the entire department goes up, because everyone is inspired and attracted by their presence. So the lesson is clear. If you can, collaborate with superstars, but try to avoid competing directly against them. The second law reveals a fundamental disconnect between what we do and what we get. But it doesn't explain how this disconnect happens. What is the engine that drives this unbounded winner-take-all success? This brings us to the third law, which is perhaps the most powerful and actionable law of all. It's a simple multiplication equation. The third law is previous success times fitness equals future success. Let's unpack this. The first part, previous success, is a phenomenon Barabasi calls preferential attachment. It's a fancy term for a simple idea you already know. Success breeds success. The rich get richer, the famous get more famous. Think about Kickstarter. A sociologist named Arnoux van der Rijt ran an experiment where he randomly selected 100 new projects that had $0 in funding and gave each of them a small, anonymous donation. He then watched what happened. Those projects were more than twice as likely to attract further funding and reach their goal compared to a control group he didn't fund. That small initial dose of previous success acted like a signal to everyone else. It created social proof. It said, "Someone believes in this. Maybe you should too." We see this everywhere. The more followers a social media account has, the faster it gains new ones. The more 5-star reviews a book has on Amazon, the more likely you are to buy it. We are wired to follow the crowd. When we see that something is already successful, we assume it must be good. This is the engine of runaway hits. But it also creates a problem. If success just snowballs, does quality even matter? Could a terrible song become a hit just because it got a few lucky breaks early on? This is where the second part of the equation comes in. Fitness. Fitness is Barabasi's word for a product's inherent quality and competitiveness. A high-fitness song is catchy and well-produced. A high-fitness product is well-designed and solves a real problem. To test this, researchers created an experiment called Music Lab. They created a website where thousands of teenagers could listen to and download songs from unknown bands. In the control group, the teens just saw a list of songs and made their own choices. But in the other groups, they could also see how many times each song had been downloaded by others. What happened? Social influence took over. In each group, a few songs would randomly get a little popular early on, and then preferential attachment would kick in, and those songs would shoot to the top of the charts. But here's the crazy part. The hit song was different in every single group. The outcome was completely unpredictable. A song that was a smash hit in one universe was a total flop in another. It seemed like quality didn't matter at all. But then they tried one more thing. They took the most popular song from the control group, the song that people liked the most when there was no social influence, the one with the highest fitness, and in a new experiment, they artificially put it at the bottom of the rankings. They lied to people, making it look like it was the least popular song. For a while it languished there, But slowly, person by person, people discovered it. They listened, they liked it, and they downloaded it, ignoring the social signals. Over time, the high-fitness song fought its way back up the charts. It couldn't be kept down. This is the magic of the third law. Preferential attachment can give a mediocre product a boost, but it can't make a terrible product a long-term success. And social influence can temporarily bury a great product, but true fitness will eventually shine through. When you have both a high-fitness product that also gets an early dose of success, that's when you get a phenomenon like Harry Potter. J.K. Rowling's first book was rejected by 12 publishers. It had a tiny initial print run. It had very low previous success, but the book's fitness was off the charts. It was a magnificent story. And so, reader by reader, word of mouth built. Preferential attachment slowly kicked in, and it multiplied with the book's incredible fitness, creating one of the biggest successes in human history. The third law is an equation. S equals Q times R. Your future success, S, is the product of your personal ability to execute. What Barabasi calls your Q factor, your personal fitness, multiplied by the value of your idea, R. A brilliant person, high Q, with a mediocre idea, low R, will have mediocre success. A mediocre person, low Q, with a brilliant idea, high R, will also have mediocre success. You need both to create a blockbuster. This explains the mystery of Exploding Kittens. The card game that raised nearly $9 million on Kickstarter. Was the game itself just that good? No one knew. No one had played it. But one of its creators was Matthew Inman, the artist behind the wildly popular webcomic The Oatmeal. He brought a huge built-in audience of millions of fans, a massive dose of previous success. He collaborated with a hub, and the project exploded. So far, we've talked about individual success, but most of the important work in the world is done by teams. And this is where things get really complicated, because when people work together, a whole new set of laws comes into play. This brings us to the fourth law of success. While team success requires diversity and balance, a single individual will receive credit for the group's achievements. Let's look at that first part. What makes a team successful? A researcher named Brian Uzi studied the creative teams behind Broadway musicals. A musical's success doesn't depend on the stars. It depends on the 6 key collaborators: the composer, lyricist, director, producer, choreographer, and librettist. Uzi found that the most successful shows had a specific blend of people. They had teams with a mix of old friends who had worked together before and total strangers who were bringing in fresh perspectives. Too much familiarity, and the work becomes stale and derivative. Too many strangers, and the team lacks the trust and shared language to create something cohesive. You need a balance of diversity and familiarity. The legendary jazz album Kind of Blue by Miles Davis is a perfect example. Davis brought together a group of incredible musicians, some of whom had never even met before, and gave them just a few simple sketches of music. He created a structure that allowed for both cohesion and wild, innovative improvisation. But there's a danger in assembling a team of all-stars. A biologist named William Muir ran an experiment with chickens. He wanted to breed a flock of super chickens that laid the most eggs. So in one group he took the most productive hen from each cage and put them all together. In a control group he just took the most productive cage and let them breed as a group. After 6 generations, the chickens from the productive cage were thriving. They were plump, healthy, and their egg production had soared. The super chickens? It was a scene of carnage. Out of 9 hens, only 3 were left. The others had been pecked to death by their hyper-aggressive cage mates. The survivors were scarred and featherless. They laid no eggs at all. When you put too many dominant individuals together, they stop focusing on the collective goal and start fighting each other for dominance. This too much talent effect has been observed in professional sports teams and even in academic departments. Success then comes from a balanced team, often guided by a strong leader. In successful software projects on the platform GitHub, the work is never evenly distributed. One person, the leader, does the vast majority of the coding, while others contribute specialized pieces. Diversity needs a visionary leader to channel it effectively. But this leads us to the dark side of teamwork, the second half of the fourth law. A single individual will receive credit for the group's achievements. Even when a team works perfectly, our brains are wired to assign credit to one person. We talk about Darwin's theory of evolution, a Steve Jobs invention, a Miles Davis album. We simplify the complex web of collaboration into a single, heroic narrative. This is a huge problem, and it has a name: credit misallocation. And no story illustrates this more painfully than that of Douglas Prasher. In the 1980s, Prasher was a young scientist who had a brilliant idea. He was the first person to clone the gene for green fluorescent protein, or GFP, the stuff that makes jellyfish glow. He realized this glowing protein could be used as a tiny flashlight inside living cells, allowing scientists to watch biological processes in real time. It was a discovery that would revolutionize medicine. But Prasher's work was considered obscure. His grant proposals were rejected. He lost his funding. Before quitting science to take a job with the Department of Agriculture, he mailed the cloned gene he had discovered to the only two scientists who had shown any interest in his work. 16 years later, those two scientists, Martin Chalfie and Roger Tsien, were in Stockholm accepting the Nobel Prize for their work on GFP. They had built upon Prasher's foundational discovery and published a series of groundbreaking papers. Over time, the community's perception shifted. They became the face of GFP. And where was Douglas Prasher on the day the prize was announced? He was living in Huntsville, Alabama, driving a courtesy van for a Toyota dealership. Barabasi's team developed an algorithm that could analyze citation patterns and predict who would win the Nobel Prize. The algorithm correctly picked the winner in almost every case. But for the 2008 prize in chemistry, it kept insisting the prize should have gone to Douglas Prasher. The data trail showed that his contribution was the most central, the most foundational. But because he had disappeared from the network, because he stopped publishing, the perception of the community shifted, and he was forgotten. Credit isn't about performance. It's about perception, and perception is heavily biased. The community gives credit to the people it already knows, the ones with a consistent track record in a particular area. This is why it's so dangerous to collaborate with a much more famous person. Even if you do 90% of the work, the world will likely give them 90% of the credit. The story of Darlene Love, the legendary backup singer, shows us the way out. For decades, her powerful voice was the secret ingredient on countless hit records by Elvis Presley and others, but she remained anonymous, scrubbing toilets to make ends meet. Then one day, she heard her own voice on the radio and decided she would no longer be invisible. She fought for decades to step out of the shadows, take center stage, and claim the credit she deserved. In 2011, she was finally inducted into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. She didn't just wait for the community to recognize her. She strategically built her own platform and forced the community to see her. This brings us to the fifth and final law, a law that is a source of incredible hope, especially for anyone who feels like they're running out of time. You've probably heard the quote from Albert Einstein: "A person who has not made his great contribution to science before the age of 30 will never do so." It's a terrifying thought. The idea that creativity is a young person's game, that we have a creative peak and then it's all downhill. For years, the data seemed to support this. Most Nobel Prize winners did their breakthrough work in their 20s and 30s. But Barabasi and his team, led by a researcher named Roberta Sinatra, looked at the data in a new way. They found that yes, scientists tend to have their biggest breakthroughs early in their careers. But it's not because they are more creative when they are young. It's because they are more productive. Imagine your career is like playing the lottery. Every project you start, every paper you write, every painting you create is a lottery ticket. It has a random chance of being a huge hit. The key insight from the research is that the odds on each ticket don't change throughout your career. Your first paper has the same chance of being a breakthrough as your last one. So, why do young people have more breakthroughs? because they buy more tickets. Early in our careers, we are hungry, driven, and we churn out project after project. As we get older, we get distracted by other responsibilities, we become more selective, we burn out. Our productivity drops, we buy fewer tickets so we have fewer wins. This leads us to the beautiful, empowering fifth law. With persistence, success can come at any time. Creativity has no expiration date. Your ability to have a breakthrough doesn't diminish with age. What matters is your willingness to keep trying, to keep starting new projects, to keep buying lottery tickets. The story of John Fenn proves this beyond a doubt. Fenn was a chemist who was forced into mandatory retirement by Yale University at the age of 70. His department thought he was past his prime, but Fenn felt he was just getting started. He moved to another university, opened a new lab, and continued his work. At the age of 85, he was awarded the Nobel Prize for a discovery he made after he was forced to retire. He published his final paper at the age of 90. The fifth law tells us that our biggest success could be our very next project, regardless of our age. As long as we persist, as long as we keep putting our work out into the world, we always have a chance. Success isn't about one single moment of genius. It's about a lifetime of showing up. And that's a formula worth believing in. When you close a book like The Formula, it's easy to feel a little bit cynical. The idea that success isn't a pure meritocracy, that it's shaped by invisible networks, biases, and a healthy dose of luck, can be disheartening. It feels like the game is rigged. But that's not the feeling I'm left with. In fact, I think this is one of the most empowering books you could ever read about ambition. Why? Because it takes success out of the realm of magic and turns it into a science. And when something is a science, it means you can understand it. It means you can use its principles to your advantage. It means you are no longer a passive victim of fate. You are an active participant with a rulebook. The most powerful lesson, for me, is the shift in mindset from me to we. We are raised to believe that our success is a solo journey. We think we have to be the smartest, the fastest, the most talented person in the room. But Barabasi shows us that this is a profound misunderstanding. Your success is never just yours. It is granted to you by a community. It lives and breathes in the network that connects us all. This doesn't diminish the importance of your work. It elevates it. It means that your work isn't just for you, it is for us. And when you start thinking that way, it changes how you approach everything. You stop hoarding your ideas, and you start sharing them. You stop seeing others as competitors, and you start seeing them as potential collaborators, as the very people who will one day champion your success. So what can you do, right now, to put these laws into practice? First, understand the game you are playing. Ask yourself honestly, in my chosen field, how is performance measured? Is it clear, like in tennis? Or is it subjective, like in art? If it's clear, then your primary focus must be on honing your craft, on being undeniably excellent. But if it's subjective, and for most of us it is, then you must dedicate just as much energy to building your network as you do to building your skills. Connect with people, share your work, make your contributions visible. Remember the tree in the forest. Second, if you're starting a new project, a new business, a new creative endeavor, don't just focus on making it perfect. Focus on finding your first followers, your first 10 customers, your first 100 readers, your first dozen supporters. As Arnoud van der Rijt's experiments showed, that initial dose of success is the most powerful. It's the spark that can ignite the fire of preferential attachment. Don't be afraid to ask your friends, your family, your small circle of supporters to be those first believers. Their initial endorsement is more valuable than you can possibly imagine. And finally, never, ever give up. The fifth law is the ultimate rebuttal to the voice of doubt in your head that tells you it's too late, that you've missed your chance. John Fenn won his Nobel Prize at 85. The Japanese artist Hokusai, who created the iconic print The Great Wave, produced his most famous works in the last 2 decades of his life. Your Q factor, your innate ability to create and execute, doesn't fade. The only thing that fades is our willingness to try. So keep buying those lottery tickets. Your next project, whether you're 17 or 70, could be the one that changes everything. That was a summary of the formula by Albert-Laszlo Barabasi. We've journeyed through the core laws today, but I'll be honest with you, a summary is just a map. The real treasure is found when you make the journey yourself. The real magic happens in the quiet moments of reading, when a particular story or a simple phrase connects with your own life in a way you didn't expect. This summary is designed to help you decide if this book is worth your time. If anything we've talked about today has lit a fire in you, grab a copy. Reading it isn't just about learning the rules of the game. It's an experience that can genuinely change how you play it. Also, if you found this journey valuable, please take a moment to subscribe, and perhaps share it with someone else who is on their own path to success. There are so many life-changing books on the billionaire's bookshelf, and we have many more journeys to take together. Let's keep growing.